Good day, everyone. I am Joanne A. Sautilio, and I will be going to discuss about organizing information in the 21st century. So, if we begin with the premises that the role of and responsibilities of information professional is to ensure that we get the right information to the right person at the right time. Then, we have a framework for considering what information, in what format, and by what means to make it accessible and usable for whom, where, and when. In short, there is a clear motivation for developing and implementing approaches to organizing information, and a long history of principles and best practices on which to draw. Consideration for organizing information in the 21st century may perhaps offer different challenges in terms of the sheer volume of both analog and digital information, and in the multitude of the ways in which individuals can find, acquire, and use it. But the underlying principles are surprisingly robust, largely because they are focused on requirement for information to a person. Simple in its statement, more complex it is realization. In some cases, the person is individual whose need may vary in myriad ways and be influenced for a progression of changing circumstances. So, organizing information, historical content. A cursory search of a crucial phrase, the right information to the right person at the right time, yields its expression across many disciplines including cognitive science, computer science, business intelligence, banking, healthcare, marketing, and philanthropy, among others. Clearly, this is not the sole domain of information discipline, not unless it is and has been a defining and consistent links for library and information science, or LIS, practice, and the across time, and it is within the LIS context that the following brief history of organizing information is presented. Subsequently, sections will broaden the focus as both LIS and the concept of organizing information have likewise extended interpretation. Notwithstanding the earliest physical collection of papyri, tablets, scrolls, and manuscripts that were recorded for the private or limited shares use of religious and other scholarly monastic communities, or an administrator and rulers of states, approaches to organizing information on a broader, more exclusive scales within the modern history of LIS, as systemized and documented from the middle 19th century onward. So, organizing information and the promotion accessible collection. So, 19th century precursors to contemporary public libraries generally required some levels of paid membership. For example, Machine Institute charged a small rental fees for inspiration, vocational, and later popular fiction of non-fiction. Commercial circulating libraries, which first appeared in the United Kingdom in the early 1700s, and in the United States in 1762, made newly published book, most often fiction, available in a rental bias subscription library. In contrast, were not motivated by profit, but rather by the interest of their members, who is exchanged for an annual membership fee or a purchase of shares, both largely non-fiction materials in a particular subject areas of a member interest, and build a permanent collections managed by a librarian. The Library Company of Philadelphia, started by a Benjamin Franklin in 1741, was the first of its kind in Northern America. Learned societies directed a portion of membership fee to develop collection in a specialized subject. The Chemical Society of London, considered the oldest of such models, was established in 1841. Information organizations where it is existed in the earliest library often consisted for a recording of titles of books in the collection, sometimes by subject, while physical storage placed as emphasis of a security more than access, with a graded stock of even books changed to shelves. So, organizing information, the growth in free public libraries and compulsory education. While the first library fully accessible and free to the general public in the United Kingdom was established by endowment from the estate of Humphrey Cheetham in Manchester in 1643, the first public library as we would recognize them today began to appear in the mid-19th century. The Public Libraries Act of 1950, 2017, and Act of Parliament of the United Kingdom give local boroughs the power of establish free public libraries, legislating the rights to universal free access to information. Although the first public library in the United States, fully supported by taxation, was established in Peterborough, New Hampshire in 1833. The second and large Boston Public Library was founded in 1852, the same year that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts passed as a compulsory education law, with a bequest of $52,000 for the purchase of books between 1883 and 1929. American industrialist and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie founded the building of furnishing over 2,500 free libraries in the English-speaking world to bring books and information to all people. The growth in demand for both books and information likewise correspond with the enhancement of compulsory education laws, including the Elementary Education Act in the United Kingdom in 1880 and the progressive education movement of middle to late 1800s in United States that culminated in compulsory elementary education in the States in 1918. So, organizing information, the evolution of standards. So, organizing information and design universal classification system. So, paralleling the rise in collection of physical materials and the demand of greater access to a growing body of published literature and information, we see an articulation of systematic approaches to organizing them, not only as material resources to be inventoried, made accessible and stored sometimes as part as an enduring materials cultural record, but also as an assemblage of ideas, important topics, emerging themes, parts of the logical expression of the thoughts, trend, and socio-political, as well as popular worldviews, approaches to organizing information and literature according to their subject content assume a similar universal perspective, beginning, generally speaking, with an articulation of the universe of knowledge as a whole and dividing it into classes, subclasses, and sub-subclasses, reflecting a hierarchy of genus-species relationship and a model of biological taxonomy popular at that time. So in 1876, Melville Dewey published the first edition of a classification of subject index for cataloging and arranging the books and pamphlets of the library intended as a classification of knowledge. Dewey articulated as a set of principles and schedules for 10 main classes subdivided again and by the 10 into 100 division, with a divided decimal to yield a total of 1,000 categories. He also included an alphabetical subject index. The Dewey Decimal Classification, or DDC, now it's a 23rd printed edition, also with a regular updated web-based product, was adapted and expanded by Paul Ouellette and Henry Lafontaine to function as an classified index to a universal bibliography. First invention in 1895, while the Repertory Bibliographique Universelle itself was never realized, perhaps foreshadowing what was made possible only by 20th century develops in global online catalogs such as WorldCat. Other worldwide recognized and successful library and bibliographic classification system, the Universal Decimal Classification, or UDC, was first published in French between 1904 and 1907. Currently published in over 40 languages, its usage as of 2017 has expanded as a bibliographic documentation and information services. So, a brief discussion of DDC within a fertile bibliographic taxonomic period of the later 19th century would perhaps be incomplete without reference to the anti-DDC or subject classification SC developed by James Duff Brown and first published in 1906. Dissatisfied with perceived weaknesses among them, the American bias inherent to the DDC, Brown undertook the design more uniquely British system following an order of scientific progression. Main classes are listed by the matter and force, followed by 192 Lin C. Howard, downloaded by Universite this book at 8:36 June 12, 2018. Life, Mind, and finally by record, each expressed by a single uppercase letter. Chan 2007. Subdivisions are notated by Arabic numerical with categorical tables provided for commonly used subdivision. What units DDC or UDC and SC is their respective reference to a particular perspective on a world of knowledge and its subsequently arrangement by a main classes, subclasses, and additional subdivision. So Charles Almy Cutter's expanded classification, or EC, of which 6 of 7 versions were completed before the Cutter's death, presented the universe of knowledge in 27 main classes. He further subdivided classes following an evolutionary order according to their sequence in creation, using uppercase letter for both main classes and subdivision. While only a cursory description is offered here, Cutter's EC, while important in its own right and potential as a classification for organizing information, is perhaps more widely recognized as the model for a Library of Congress classification, influencing the design of an enduring system of classifications, schedules of discipline-based classes and subclasses, further subdivises topic and or by form, place, or time. The first schedule, Class EF, American History and Geography, was published in 1901, with all but the schedule for Law or Class K being completed by 1948, Chan 2007. Organizing information and design of descriptive codes and standards. So in 1841, we see in introduction to the British Museum printed book catalog, the British Museum Cataloging Rules. The publication of these 19 rules drafted by Sir Anthony Panizzi in 1841 is considered to be the first substantial code ever produced, revealing the function of the catalog as an inventory of a collection, as well as a finding list. Shortly after, in 1853, in the United States, Charles C. Jewett, 1953, develops a code of 33 rules largely based on Pazzi's rules for cataloging the collection of the Smithsonian Institution. This was followed less than a quarter century later, Organizing Information in the 21st Century, 193 downloaded by Universite de Source-Book at 8:36 June 12, 2018, by the publication of Charles Ammi Cutter's Rules for a Dictionary Catalog, first edition in 1876, containing 369 rules for descriptive cataloging, subject headings, and filing. As the basis for the dictionary catalog, which has largely predominated to the current day, Cutter's rules have continued their relevancy based on her principles of the convenience of the public. This reflective as a greater awareness of the respect for those for whom information was to organize rather than for those doing the organizing. This is them to which we will return Cutter's insistence. The person using the library should be able to, first, find a book for which either the author, the title, or the subject are known, or second, see what the library has by given author on a given subject or a given kind of literature or genre, or third, choose a book as to its edition, bibliographically, or its character, literary of topics. It is likewise reflective of an innovation of organizing information that emphasizes the privacy of the users and his or her particular needs, habits, or preferences. Cutter's guiding principles have been foundational to the development of subsequent codes and standards for cataloging, that is, for organizing information within a library settings. While the 1908 American edition of Catalog Rules, author and title entries in 1908 published by the American Library Association or ALA include many of Cutter's rules, it omitted its principles as well as a rule of subject headings. Nonetheless, ALA 1908 did set out rules appropriate to larger academic and research libraries as trend continue in subsequent codes and consequently of less relevance of use to smaller libraries and particularly to small local public and school libraries. Historical to world wars instructed of the further publication of codes and standards for organizing information yield in library collection. The rules for descriptive cataloging in the Library of Congress, published in 1949 by the library, went beyond books to also include rules for how to describe serials, maps, reliefs, models, globes, atlases, music, facsimiles, photocopies, microfilms, and iconobilla. A sister publication, a second edition of ALA Cataloging Rules for an author entitled Entities, published by ALA in 1949, dealt only with what author and title entries should be created for an item and how should they be constructed. This combination of ALA and LC codes enduring for over 18 years until the publication in 1967 of the first edition of Anglo-American Cataloging Rules or AACR in 1967, representing the deliberation of National Cataloging Committee members for the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. AACR in 1967 brought together rules for description and entry covering books for some non-book materials, while these agreements were sufficient to necessitation publication of separate British and North American texts with Ducey in AACR in 1967, and deliberate corporative attempt to issue guidelines for organizing information in libraries for a go beyond a single national border, while Anglo-American rather than international pursue the seed of stepping out of the broadening the reach of library in 194. Lane C. Howard, downloaded by Universite to Circbook at 8:36 June 12, 2018. Practices relating to organizing information and to making collection accessible more broadly, as sworn in these two texts. Organizing information in pursuit of universal bibliographic control. So the two decades of the 1960s and 1970s mark a period of tremendous cooperation, innovation, internationalization, and even universalization. This time frame was to development of tools and practices for organizing information in libraries, as dynamic and rich of the last quarter of 19th century, as described above, and it is at this time that we begin to see the green shoot of frameworks and operational innovation and underpin contemporary discovery and exchange of information and of actual object within a collection, regardless of their place of origin. In addition to the adoption of a statement of principles for standardized approaches to the choice and forms of headings and entries, words in catalogs or printed books, and the publication of AACR in 1967, a first international code of cataloging rules. The 1960s are notable in bibliographic history for the development of the machine-readable cataloging format or a MARC, and our creation of a Oho College Library Center, OCLC, as the first network for exchange of online catalog records overseen by Henry T. Avram. The design of a MAC communication format provides the framework for recordings and exchanging bibliographic information, including descriptive, subject headings, and classification elements, and supporting subsequently record for authority control. For over 40 years, the regular update of MARC format, incorporating with the previous separate national MARC formats of United States of Canada and United Kingdom, proved sufficiently robust and flexible to support the creation and exchange of the records documenting library collection internationally and through the automated library system of networks such as OCLC. By 1970, there was not only a commitment to idea in internationalization of the creation of exchange of bibliographic information, but also now the means to do so through a communication format of MARC of a growing numbers of cooperative automated networks, some developed by national libraries, others by large academic institutions. OCLC, UTLAS, or ARLIN, WLN, and etc. During the 1970s, national cataloging agencies developed their own version of MARC formats. In 1977, the International Federation of Library Association, or EFLA, introduced the concept of a universal MARC format through the creation of the UniMARC bibliographic format. By the end of the 20th century, MARC 21 and UniMARC predominated, with usage split largely between an Anglo-American cataloging community and all other respectively. While the MARC formats provided by the vehicle for recording and communicating bibliographic information, there still remained a need for defining a common approach to describing materials in library collection. In the same way, in 1961, Paris Principle has articulated a uniform standard for choosing and recording author of title entries for a collection catalog. In 1969, an international meeting of cataloging experts, or IMCE, agreed on order and content of a standard bibliographic description and set off the draft in an international standard. The result of this deliberation were published by EFLA as the first international standard for bibliographic description, or ISBD, in 1971, with the ISBD for the monographs, ISBD-M, following in 1973, and ISBD-G, a general ISBD to serve as a framework for format-specific ISBD as published in 1977. The issuance of the standard bibliographic description incorporated primary elements of descriptive cataloging records into one of 7 areas. These included: first, title and the statement of authorship; second, edition; third, publication; fourth, physical description; fifth, series; sixth, notes; and seven, standards. Standard numbering. A family of ISBDs followed in succession, including standardized description for older monographs publication, antiquarian, or ISBD-A; for computer files, ISBD-CF; for cartographic materials, ISBD-CM; for serial and other continuing resources, ISBD-CR; for electronic resources, ISBD-ER; for non-book materials, ISBD-NBM; and for printed music, ISBD-PM. In 2011, a consolidated edition of the ISBD brought all previous separated standard description together in one text, while some of names of the areas may have changed, and an area of content form of media type added in 2009. The framework of ISBD continues to provide robust content standards to ensuring the consistency, coherency, and completeness of the metadata records used in resource discovery services. Stepping out, responding to the world of information at our fingertips. Rethinking approaches to organizing information into the internet and metadata. So in the brief history of the internet, Barry M. Liner et al. Remind us that the technological evolution began with early research on packet switching and ARPANET in July 1961. Leonard Kleinrock at MIT began with the early research, published the first paper on packet switching theories. Just over a year later, J.C.R. Licklider, also from MIT, the first head of the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, discussed his galactic network concept in series of memos describing a configuration that is reminiscent to today's internet. He envisioned a global interconnected set of computers through which everyone could quickly access data and programs from any sites. A collaboration among government, academia, and industry built on the theory of packet switching, with a plan of ARPANET, subsequently published in 1967. By the end of 1969, 4 hosts computers were connected together into initial ARPANET, launching what would grow to become the Internet in 1972. ARPANET was introduced to the public at the International Computers Communication Conference. An email was added as an application. At about the same time, work on Internet technology, which was important to the launch of subsequently local area networks, was underway to Xerox PARC. Throughout in 1970s, a number of proposed build networks and no supporting emails and titles for specific and academic research communities proliferated. The creation of the domain name system allowed for resolving hierarchy host names into a new familiar internet address. As Liner et al. Summarized, by 1985, internet was well established as a technology supporting a broad community of researchers and developers, and was being to be used by other communities for a daily computer communication. Electronic mails was being used broadly across several communities, often with a different system, but interconnection between different mail systems was demonstrating the utility of broad-based electronic communication between people. The technical groundwork described above laid the foundation to large library network as well as the development of LANs essential to supporting automated system within local library configuration and the infrastructure necessary for online public access catalog or OPACs, which began appearing during the early 1980s. Of even more significance for approaches to organizing information was the advent of the World Wide Web. Then Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, he wrote the first web browser program in 1990. It was subsequently released to the general public on the internet in August 1991. With the advent of the web and proliferation of the people-to-people networking via the internet and email. The number of websites of the volume of the web organizing information in the 21st century. 197 download by University this workbook at 8:36 June 12, 2018. Content began to take off. It was from a need to respond quickly and with great flexibility to this plethora to content that Dublin Core metadata was born. Dublin Core was only one of the myriad of the metadata schema to emerge during the 1990s as BACA or 2016. Kaplan in 2001 and Gilliland 2016, Howard in 2004, and others has noted, during the period was the steady activity to develop SGML, XML, HTML-based metadata standards for both general application and specialized information domains. Examples included to encoded archival description. In 1996, an SGML-based encoding scheme for archive and library finding aids. The text encoding initiative header a SGML-based encoding scheme for complex textual structure. The Visual Resources Association or Visual Document Description category for describing any entity or event that may be captured in physical form as a visual document to original work and including works of arts, architecture, and artifacts or structure from material, popular, and folk culture. And the content standard for digital geospatial metadata or ICSDM-GM metadata schema and standard supported discovery of digital objectives by means of defined properties and corresponding values to could be embedded within the subject to be related by the web image research engine. For example, a digital object encoded with Dublin Core metadata can be retrieved through a Google search, whereas a search engine is enabled to find or DC properties and the values associated with them. At the same time, work was continuing apace of the design of an object-oriented domain. Ontology and CIDOC conceptual reference model for representing and making accessible digital objectives for museums, archives, and library. Rethinking approaches for organizing information modeling function. In 1990, the EFLA UBC and International MARC or UBC IM program and EFLA Division of Bibliographic Control sponsored in 1990 Stockholm Seminar of Bibliographic Records. One of the 9 resolutions adopted at the seminar called for the commission of a study of define the function requirements for bibliographic records. As stated in the terms of reference and subsequently approved in 1992, the study was to clearly define the function that a bibliographic record could be required to address across a variety of media and diverse users' need. Further, it was to go beyond prescriptive cataloging, only also consider name, title, and subject entries and other organizing elements such as annotation and classification. A second charge to the study group formed in 1991 in response to a resolution was to recommend a basic level of functionality and basic data requirements for records created by national bibliographic agencies and a core level standard that would help reduce the cost of cataloging by means of briefer records that would not nonetheless meet the core requirements of the users. The latter undertook 4 required tasks with a 50 assigned to the study group as a whole as follows. First, determine the full range of functions of the bibliographic records and state the primary uses of the record as a whole. Second, develop the framework that identifies and clearly defines the full range of entities, example, work text, subject, edition, and authors, that are the subject of interest to users of bibliographic records, and the types of relationship organizing information in the 21st century in 199 downloaded in University Stakehold and 836 June 12, 2018 that may exist between those entities. For each of the entities in the framework, identify and define the function, example, to describe, to identify, to differentiate, or to relate, that bibliographic record is expected to perform. Fourth, identify the key attributes, example, title, date, and size, of each entity of relationship that are required for each specific function to be performed. Attribute required related specifically to the media or format of the bibliographic items where applicable. And last, for the national libraries, for the bibliographic records created by the National Bibliographic Agency, recommend a basic level of functionality that relates specifically to the entities identified in the framework and the functions that are relevant to each. Function requirements were defined related for 4 generic tasks that user performs when searching national bibliographies and local library catalogs. This may include using data to find resources that correspond to a user's research criteria, to identify that what is retrieved in what was sought, or to distinguish in it from other entities with the same title, to select a resource appropriate to users' need, and to obtain, order, or acquire the entity as described. There are 10 entities of subject of interest to users in particular domain. The things that data describe. The entities themselves serves as a focal point for clusters of information in the bibliographic arena. They were defined as work, expression, manifestation, item, person, corporate body, concept, object, event, and place. So this foundation rethinking of content and structure of bibliographic records based on a set of essential user requirements fostered first, innovation in subsequent standards revision most notable on RDA, resource description and access, publication in 2009 with an update in 2016 of the F+ Statement of Cataloging Principles, and creation of the FRBR family of the conceptual models for authority data. New approach should include in the following features. An emphasis of a new edition as an online product. A print edition would also be published. Greater alignment of the structure with a functional requirements of bibliographic records and the function requirements of authority record. Instruction for recording data separated from guidelines for presenting data. A more useful, user-friendly layout and formatting of instruction. A division of rules in three parts, that is part 1 for the resource description, part 2 for the creation of access point for a person, families, and corporate bodies, and citation of relative works, expression, manifestation, and item, and a part 3 for constructing names and titles, accession point, and other data for authority control. A link of guidelines on levels of description, access, and authority control for functionality. Appendices with guidelines for the presentation of both descriptive and authority data. Formal charge to working group on a future of bibliographic control include presenting findings on how bibliographic control and other descriptive practices could effectively support management of an access to library materials in involving information and technology environment, and recommending ways in which the library community could collectively move towards achieving that vision. Working group made recommendation in the following 5 general areas. First, increase the efficiency of bibliographic production for all libraries through increased corporate and increased sharing of bibliographic records, and by maximizing the use of data produced throughout the entire supply chain for information resources. Transfer effort into higher value activity, in particular expanded the responsibilities for knowledge creation for exposing rare and unique materials held by libraries that are currently hidden for views and thus underused. Position our technology for the future by recognizing the World Wide Web is both our technology platforms and appropriate platforms for the delivery of the standards, recognizing the people are not the only users of the data we produce in the name of bibliographic control, but also to our machine application and interacted with those data in a variety of ways. Fourth, position our community for the future by facilitating the incorporation of evaluative and other user-supplied information into our resource description. Work to realize the potential of the functional requirements for bibliographic records, framework for revealing and capitalizing on the various relationships that exist among information resources. And fifth, strengthen the library profession through education and development of measurement that will inform decision making now and in the future. Rethinking approaches to organizing information, the systematic web of open data. So while the period from 1997 to 2011 represented a time of significant change to Anglo-American cataloging rules and even uncertainty for its accessors RDA, it was also paralleled by equally disrupted innovation within communities focused on the metadata and the web. As internet capabilities and web-enabled content continued to evolve, there was impetus for moving beyond digital documents to meaningful, systematically linked, discrete packets of information or data. In 1999, the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, adopted the Resource Description Framework as a recommendation. The RDF 1.0 and the 1.1 specifications were published in 2004 and 2014. Respectively, the RDF data model, similarly to entity relationship of class diagrams, is based upon the idea of 204 Linné Seward, downloaded by Universite de Cert book at 8:36 June 12, 2018, of making statement about resources in the form of subject, predicate, object expression, known as triple or tuple. The subject denotes the resource, and the predicate denotes traits as an aspect of the resource and expresses a relationship between the subject and the object. These links data principles include using uniform resource URI to identify or name things information uniquely, using hypertext transfer protocol or HTTP URS so that people can look up difference those named things or information, providing useful information about the URI named things information using standard formats, for example RDF, XML, SPRQ, or search protocol, including links to other URIs to enable discover and related named things or information. Rethinking approaches to organizing information linked data projects and libraries. Also, a particular notes in a virtual international authority file, first prototype in 1998, the VIAF was originally created as a database of authority files and base of near 45 million authority records. In 2006, researchers for OCLC began publishing some of the data in a resource description format or RDF. By July 2014, the VIAF consortium had participants for 29 countries representing 24 national libraries and 14 other agencies. At that time, the VIAF database contained 35 million personal names, over 5 million corporate names, nearly as 500,000 geographic names, and over 2 million standardized or uniform titles or names of creative works. Shortly after publication of a record report of the Library of Congress Working Group of the Future of Bibliographic Control, in 2008, a series of value vocabularies and element sets created by the Library Standards community were published in the Open Metadata Registry in 2017 in RDF format. These include DCMI terms, Dublin Core terms, DC terms in 2008, the VIAF in 2010, Library of Congress subject headings 2008, top-level hierarchies in Dewey Decimal Classification 2009, the faceted application of subject terms of FAST 2011, and ISBD element set 2011. FRBR 2011, basic of Mark 21 and Unimark vocabularies and elements, and a number of RDA vocabularies and the properties ongoing. Stepping up consideration for the 21st century. So first is a commitment to supporting data that is created and captured to source that is from the point of publication. This allows not only for having a bibliographic records available to comply the resources from publication to acquisition to making accessible and to preserving, but also to tracking sales and use to ensuring that intellectual property rights are respected and corresponding loyalties paid. This might include a large publisher were oriented towards print or digital, an independent wholesaler or retailers, an individual who is self-publishing, and etc. Second, guiding framework is supporting to exchange data and information between among multiple libraries. Among other cultural memories is situation or GLAM sector, and increasingly among other information-intensive organizations and services, including those in the private and public sector. social media platforms, and those engine information commerce. This reflects commitment to ensuring a common language for communicating while also providing maximal exposure of local collection of a cultural memory across multi-platforms. And the third dominant framework involves exposing our collection broadly and fully, not just to our immediate user community or our shared network or across a global aggregators such as WorldCat, European or DPLA, but to anyone anywhere, consistent with the knowledge management maxim that knowledge grows when it flows, drawing our data from open resource, whether public or private sector, and ensuring that others have equal access to our data has the potential to support immediate information needs or user as well as creative reuse of data to innovate. What should we be thinking of today? Insights and strategies for organizing information. So as Seaman and Goddard 2015 noted recently, while linked data has dominated discussions around metadata and cataloging, the daily work of the cataloger has remained largely the same. For the most part, library has continued to acquire materials in digital and or physical analog formats for publisher, vendors, jobbers, or others, with some coming with a ready-made bibliographic records that can be downloaded directly into an OPAC or other repository. For materials lacking catalog records, there is the option of derived matching copy for a bibliographic utility, such as OCLC, to download a record from another library or network, or to engage in original cataloging, create a record for filing in a library collection. Daily work produced in many 214 Lin C. Howard, downloaded by University D. Sourcebook at 8:36 June 12, 2018. Cases supplemented by responsibilities to identify and ingest in the institutional repository catalog or other scholarly product layer digital objects produced by those who work in the organization or are associated with in some ways. A contemporary academic library, for example, may have, in addition to a catalog describing its collection of a book, serial publication, and various media formats, physical and digital, an institutional repository of scholarly output for faculty, student, and staff, a formal depository holding online disease and set of research data set being preserved for reuse or replication. The discovery layer with its single search interfaces exposes to the researcher whatever types and content of object he or she may require. So list of abbreviation. So AACR, Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, o AACR2, Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, 2nd edition, o AACR2R, Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, 2nd edition, and the revision. So ALA means that American Library Association, ARPANET, Advanced Research Project Network, BL, British Library, BNB, British National Bibliography, BNF, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, CIDOC, International Committee for Documentation Conceptual, CRM, Reference Model, CRDGM, Content Standard for Digital Geospatial Metadata. DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. DC, Dublin Core. DCMEC, Dublin Core Metadata Element Set. DCMI, Dublin Core Metadata Initiative. DDC, DWI Decimal Classification. DNC, Domain Name System. DOI, or Digital Object Identifier. DPLA, Digital Public Library of America. EAD, Encoded Archival Description. FOAF, Friend of a Friend. FAS, of Faceted Application of Subject Terms. FRAD, Functional Requirements for Authority Data. FAR, Functional Requirements for Authority Records. SAD, Functional Requirement for Subject Authority Data. FRBR, Functional Requirements for Bibliographic Records. FRBROO, Functional Requirements for Bibliographic Records Objective-Oriented Model. GLAM, Acronyms for Cultural Heritage Institution, or Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. HTML, Hypertext Markup Languages. HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. EFLA, International Federation of Library Association and Institution. IMCA, International Meeting of Cataloging Expert. ISBD, International Standard Bibliographic Description. ISO, International Standard Organization. JSC, Joint Steering Committee for the Revision of ASCR. LAND, Local Area Network. LCC, Library of Congress Classification. LCHE, Library of Congress Subject Headings. LOOD, Link Open Data. LRM, Library Reference Model, Consolidator Family of FBR Models. MARC, Machine Readable Cataloging. MARC 21, Machine Readable Cataloging. 21, Indicating Consolidation of UC MARC US, CanMark Canada, UC MARC United Kingdom, and MARC formats. NAL, National Agricultural Library, USA. NCAA, National Center for Supercomputing Application. NLM, National Library Medicine. OCLC, Ohio College Library Center. Online Information Exchange, and ONX, OPAC Library, Online Public Access Catalog. RDA, Resource Description and Access. RDF, Resource Description Framework. RLIN, Research Library Information Network. RSC, RDE Training Committee. SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language. SKOS, Simple Knowledge Organization System, Text Encoding Initiative. UBC, and Universal Bibliographic Control. UBCIM, Universal Bibliographic Control and International MARC Program. UDC, Universal Decimal Classification. UNIMARC, Universal Machine Readable Cataloging Format. URI, Uniform Resource Identifier. URN, Uniform Resource Number. UTLAS, University of Toronto Library Automation System. BIAF, Virtual International Authority File. VRI, Visual Resource Association. W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. WLLN, Western Library Network. XML, Extensible Markup Language. And that's all. This is my reference. And thank you for listening. Keep safe and God bless everyone.